This is it's a protest against a Russian oil ship that's arriving, put on by the Ukrainians who are down the bottom here. But apparently the ship now has been delayed and it won't be coming until 3 a.m. So we're supposed to arrive at 11:30. So it's not that one. That's a container ship. It's apparently an oil ship. But the protest is still going ahead. The numbers are reasonably minimal. I think when I did drive past it and tried to find a spot to park, it's about 15 or so. So I might. It's about due to kick off, so I'll head down. I do want to get a bloody latte before we start, but we'll see. Looks like someone didn't get the memo and brought their scooter to a Harley convention. And there's more coming in. There's just, I don't know, there's a whole bunch up the back there. There's a whole bunch here. They're everywhere. They're pretty shiny, pretty schmick looking. Each one has their own little different bits and pieces to them. Different wheels, different rims, different colours. Yeah, pretty cool. They all park up here at this place called the Boat Shed, which I'm just getting here's this guy coming in late with his cream coloured one. Parked up here at the Boat Shed, and then the Ukrainians are just up there, so hopefully I get my coffee. It's pretty flat out in here, and we'll see how we go.
To fight a genocidal regime that is the Russian Federation. Australians, we need your help in cutting off funding for the Russian war machine. We need the Albanese government to close the sanctions loophole that allows Australia to finance a war machine that is currently killing innocent civilians, that is attacking innocent Ukrainians on a daily basis. My mother lives in Kyiv. The first thing I did when I woke up this morning was to see if she was okay, to see if she was alive. Because the Russian armed forces and the Russian Federation waged another attack, indiscriminate attack, on Ukrainian cities and on Ukrainian civilians. Kyiv suffered one of the most horrendous nights with hundreds of Shahed drones aimed for residential buildings, aimed for critical infrastructure that were aimed to terrorize Ukrainians as they slept at night. My mom spent the night in a parking lot deep underground and slept in her car because that is the only place where she could feel safe. She no longer feels safe sleeping in her own bedroom in her apartment. A couple of months ago, a missile hit a building right next door to her. Every single window in her apartment blew out. Her bedroom door, because of the impact, her bedroom door blew out, a wooden heavy door. And my mom was thrown across the room. She hit her head and sustained injuries, but she's still alive. Many Ukrainians, unfortunately, have died because of these indiscriminate attacks on Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian cities. And although we are 15,000 kilometers away, please use your democratic right, use your democratic voice to reach out to your members of parliament and to call on Minister Penny Wong, to call on Prime Minister Albanese, to call on the Albanese government to close the sanctions loophole. Stop funding Russia's war. Close the sanctions loophole. Stop funding Russia's war. Close the sanctions loophole. Stop funding Russia's war. Close the sanctions loophole. Stop funding Russia's war.
Close the sanctions loophole. Stop funding Russia's war. Close the sanctions loophole.
Here with us, we have representatives of the Ukrainian community. We have displaced Ukrainians that have fled Russian bombs and Russian missiles. We have members of the Australian community that support us and help us fight this daily fight for survival. I would like to pass the microphone over to Ksenia that will tell you a little bit more about how Russia's war on Ukraine has impacted her here as an Australian.
Ongoing injustice. I pay my respects to elders past and present, to all First Nations people here today. My name is Ksenia and I'm here as an Australian, as a member of the Ukrainian community, as someone who believes that this country, our country, should never fund war crimes. In the early hours of tomorrow morning, while most of Sydney sleeps, Australia sleeps, a ship will arrive in Botany Bay, the Proteus Bohemia. It's flying the Singapore flag, it's operated by one of the big known companies, and it's carrying 78,000 tonnes of refined petroleum products. But here's what they don't want you to know. Between 43% and 47% of that cargo, that's up to 37,000 tons, comes from Russian crude oil. And there's more. Another tanker, the Hafnia Lily Sand, is heading to Kwinana in Western Australia. It's carrying 100,000 tons. Together, that's 180,000 tons. That's approximately $36 million in tax revenue that we Australians are sending directly to Russia's war machine this week alone. Let that sink in. $36 million in 1 week to fund Putin's war. Now, you might be asking, how is this possible? Didn't Australia ban Russian oil? Yeah, we did. In April 2022, Australia imposed sanctions banning Russian oil imports. The government was very proud of that announcement. Strong sanctions, standing with Ukraine, doing our part. But here's the dirty truth. There's a loophole. A loophole so big, as independent MP Andrew Wilkie said in Parliament, you can drive an oil tanker through it. That is exactly what is happening. Here's how that works. Russian crude oil gets shipped to refineries in India, places like Jamnagar and Mangalore. There, it's mixed with other crude, refined into petrol and diesel, and suddenly it's legal, transformed. It's no longer Russian oil, it's Indian refined product. Perfectly legal, completely compliant with Australian sanctions. And then it comes here, to Botany Bay, to Kwinana, to Geelong, to ports all around Australia. The tanker arriving tomorrow came from Jamnagar refinery in India. That refinery processes up to 55% of Russian crude oil. That's not a guess, that is tracked data. We can trace it. The companies know it, the government knows it. But because it's been substantially transformed, because it's been mixed and refined, it doesn't technically violate Australian sanctions. This is blood oil laundered through India. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Let me give you some numbers that should make every Australian angry. Since February 2023, that's less than 3 years, Australia has imported $3.5 billion worth of fuel containing Russian crude. That's sent approximately $2 billion in tax revenue straight to the Kremlin, to Putin's government, to fund the war in Ukraine. That's over $1.2 million per day, every single day, and over $800 per minute flowing to Russia's war machine from Australia. Here's something that should shame us all. Australia is the single largest importer of refined Russian oil products from all sanctioning countries in the world. Out of all of the countries that claim to stand against Putin, all the 30 plus nations, Australia imports the most. Meanwhile, Australia has provided $1.5 billion in total aid to Ukraine. $1.5 billion. We've sent more money to Russia than we've given to Ukraine. We're literally funding both sides of this war, but we're giving more to the aggressor. And it gets worse. In July, independent MP Andrew Wilkie stood up in Parliament and asked Defence Minister Richard Marles a simple question. He said, these vessels carried 90,000 tonnes of Russian source petrol paid for by Australians, which will help fund Putin's war in Ukraine. Why are the loopholes in our sanctions so big you can drive a tanker through them? The Defence Minister did not have a good answer. Then in August, Senator Fatma Payman from Western Australia raised the alarm. She told Foreign Minister Penny Wong, there are 3 oil tankers filled with products tainted by laundered Russian oil, unable to ship to Europe because the EU has cracked down on the types of sanctions evasions we're seeing right now in my home state. Western Australians need to be sure that when they're pulling the trigger at the Bowser, they aren't helping to pull triggers in Ukraine. MPs from across the political spectrum, Liberal, Labor, Independent, are all asking the same question. Why hasn't the government closed the loophole? And here's the thing that should make you even angrier. We have alternatives. The government will tell you, we need this oil. Energy security, can't risk supply disruptions, the economy. That's simply not true. These Indian refineries provide only 12% of Australia's diesel imports. That means 88% already comes from other sources. The Middle East, Malaysia, Indonesia, other refineries that don't process Russian crude. If the European Union, with an economy 10 times the size of ours, can ban this oil without creating supply problems, then surely Australia can too. This isn't about supply, this is about political will. This won't affect fuel prices for everyday Australians. This will only affect the profits of companies that have chosen to take the cheap option, to buy blood oil, to put profit over principles. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war.
Close the blood oil loophole.
Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Let me be clear about what this money funds. Every dollar that Australia sends to Russia through these oil imports pay for Iskander missiles, the ones destroying Ukrainian cities. Shahed drones, the ones targeting civilians. Caliber cruise missiles, the ones launched from the Black Sea. T-90 tanks, the ones rolling through Ukrainian farmlands. The over $2 billion we've sent could buy 95,000 Shahed drones, or 422 Iskander missiles, or 422 T-90 tanks. Every time we fill up at the petrol station, we might be funding the weapons killing Ukrainians. And here's the final insult. Australia's Defence Force, the ADF, gets its fuel from Viva Energy. Viva Energy imports from these same Indian refineries, the same ones processing Russian crude, which means Australian soldiers training Ukrainian troops to help on the front line might be running on Russian fuel. You cannot make this up. So what do we want? What are we here for? We want the Australian government to close the blood oil loophole. We want them to follow the example of the United Kingdom and the European Union, who have both banned refined petroleum products made from Russian crude, no matter where they're processed. We want transparency. We want fuel companies to disclose the origin of their crude oil. We want Australians to know what they're buying. And we want it now. Not next year, not after another inquiry, now. Because tomorrow morning at approximately 3 a.m, while Sydney sleeps, another ship carrying blood oil will dock in Botany Bay right behind us. And we're here to say, not welcome, not in our port, not with our money, not anymore. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war.
Close the blood oil loophole.
Australia, stop fueling Russia's war.
Close the blood oil loophole. Australia, stop fueling Russia's war.
Голосніше, слава Україні! Ще раз, слава Україні! It's that spirit of Ukrainian courage and pride that will make sure that Ukraine will defeat Russia and we Ukrainians will stand proud again. We all heard today about blood oil, the disgraceful importation of Russian oil into Australia via a loophole that we have called to be closed many times, a loophole which other countries have closed, a loophole which we've even given guidance to the federal government on how to close. It is disgraceful that that loophole is not closed. What is also even more disgraceful is that apart from Australian motorists unwittingly funding Russia's war, but Australian businesses are profiting from this act as well. Some of you may be aware, or maybe you're not, but that 4 of our largest superannuation funds have direct investments in Reliance Industries. Reliance Industries is the Indian refinery which refines the Russian oil and imports it here in Australia. Reliance Industries buys this oil at a discount, refines it and sells it here at full price. So Reliance is profiting. Reliance is making money from the deaths of Ukrainian civilians. And Reliance is doing this, and Australian firms are investing in Reliance. Australian Retirement Trust, Australian Super, other retirement superannuation firms have direct investments. This is another disgrace, is that Australian businesses are profiting from this. To add one more layer of disgrace to this, our own federal government is profiting from this oil trade. The Future Fund, Australia's sovereign fund, which the Australian government invests for the superannuation earnings of Australian public servants, also has a $170 million investment in Reliance Energy. So while on the one hand, the Albanese government says, no, we're not importing Russian oil, we have sanctions against it, on the other hand, they are directly investing in the companies that are profiting from it and are profiting themselves. Shame Australia, not shame Australia, but shame Albanese, shame. This really should be closed down. So once again, let's just say it again. Close the blood oil loophole. Stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Stop fueling Russia's war. Close the blood oil loophole. Stop fueling Russia's war.
Close the blood oil loophole. Stop fueling Russia's war.
Stop fueling Russia's war.
I just had a journalist, I just did an interview with a Sydney Morning Herald journalist, and he asked a question. And he said to me, Andrew, when you speak to Australians, do you think they'd be prepared to spend more on oil if it meant that it wasn't Russian oil? And I think I gave 2 responses. I said, firstly, the research shows that it wouldn't cost more if we didn't have Russian oil, because it's the Indian companies that are actually making the profits. It's not as if it's discounted oil here. But secondly, and I think this was more importantly, that Australians do say they'd be prepared to pay more. Every person that I speak to, when I explain to them and say, you know that you just filled up your car, you've just given $16 to the Kremlin, they all say, well, I don't want to do that. Where can I buy petrol? And I don't care if it costs 1 or 2 cents a litre more. I do not want to support this blood oil. I do not want to support the Kremlin. I want to support Ukraine. Australians here walking in front of us, I'm sure would also feel the same. They would say that we are here to support Ukraine. And if there is even a tiny cost, which we don't even believe there would be, that they would be prepared to do it, because Australia stands with Ukraine. And we are proud that Australia stands with Ukraine. And we know that Australia stands with Ukraine. Surveys consistently show 80% of Australians support more sanctions upon upon Russia, support more military aid for Ukraine. So when Australians want to stand with Ukraine, when Ukrainians are calling for the Australian government to do more for Ukraine, we find it unacceptable that the federal government hasn't closed this loophole, and especially when we've told them how to do it. So, in closing, once again, stop fueling Russia's war. Stop fueling Russia's war. Stop fueling Russia's war. Stop fueling Russia's war. Slava Ukraini!
G'day everybody, my name is Isabelle. Thank you so much for being here. I'm here today speaking to you as a fellow Australian, and I'm standing here because I cannot and I will not stay silent while my country sends money to the Russian regime, which is trying to destroy the homelands of my relatives, my friends, and our democratic allies. In a few hours, just later tonight, a ship called the Proteus Bohemia will arrive just behind us here, carrying fuel that's been made from Russian crude oil. Up to 37,000 tons of it. That's worth up to $20 million. And next week, the Hafnia Lillesand will dock in Western Australia with even more, 100,000 tons. Together, these two ships represent $36 million straight to Putin's war chest. This week, just alone, imagine that. And I want to talk to you today, Australian to Australian, about why this matters to all of us, about why we're all gathered here today, and about why you should care too. And let me start by saying this. Australians are good people. We care about upholding democratic values, helping our friends in need, and holding bullies to account. So when Ukraine was invaded at full scale in February 2022, Australians stood with Ukraine. You all opened your arms to refugees, we donated to humanitarian appeals, waved Ukrainian flags at protests, and the government sent military aid, medical supplies, and even trained Ukrainian soldiers. Australia has been a steadfast supporter of Ukraine, and that's why this hurts so much. Because while we were donating to help Ukraine, our government was sending aid. And while our government was sending aid, while Australian soldiers were training Ukrainian troops, Australian companies have been importing billions of dollars of oil that funds the very war we're trying to stop. It's like putting out a fire with one hand while pouring petrol on it with the other. And since February 2023, Australia has imported over $3.5 billion worth of refined fuel containing Russian crude. That has sent approximately $2 billion directly to Putin's war chest. And this is a war machine that he is funding. And let me put that into perspective. That is $1.2 million every single day. That is over $800 a minute. And here's the part that should shock you. Australia is the single largest importer in the world of refined Russian crude. Out of all the 30 plus sanctioning countries that sanction Russian crude or Russian oil, we are the biggest importer of it. Meanwhile, Australia's total aid to Ukraine is $1.5 billion, comparing to over $2 billion that we have indirectly sent to Putin. So which side of the war are we funding here? And let me tell you what that $36 million just this week from the two tankers is helping Russia to buy. 1,800 Shahed kamikaze drones can be bought with $36 million. The same drones that hit apartment buildings in Kyiv. Or 12 Iskander ballistic missiles, the ones that destroyed the children's hospital in Kyiv in July. Or it can buy 8 T-90M tanks, the ones that roll through Ukrainian villages. That's what our petrol dollars are funding, not hypothetically, but literally. Every time we fill up our car, there's a chance, a very real chance, that we're helping to pay for the missiles that kill Ukrainian children and civilians, the drones that hit schools, and the tanks that destroy family homes. And not because we want to. Most Australians don't even know about this. But because we have a sanctions loophole that is indirectly sending this money to the Kremlin. And the Ukrainian community and supporters are not the only ones exposing this. Recently, we've received massive wide news coverage in Australia, especially from the Sydney Morning Herald, which has a new series called Blood Oil. I really encourage everybody to read about it. And even MPs and senators have also urged the government to act. Andrew Wilkie, MP, recently said in Parliament, these vessels carried 90,000 tonnes of Russian-sourced petrol paid for by Australians which will help fund Putin's war in Ukraine? Why are the loopholes in our sanctions regime so big you can drive a tanker through them? And Senator Fatima Payman from WA said this in the Senate. Western Australians need to be sure that when they're pulling the trigger at the Bowser, they aren't helping to pull triggers in Ukraine. And just this week, Senator Dave Sharma said this. We have been consistently slipping down the league of contributors to Ukraine. Australian taxpayers are effectively giving more to the Russian side in this war than to the Ukrainian side. And he also said this, our allies, the US, the UK and the EU, have got the message. Australia needs to do the same. We've even seen support from Senator Michaelia Cash, from David Shoebridge, all across the aisle. Liberals, Greens, Labor, Independents, all saying the same thing. This loophole needs to close now. So why hasn't it? Because the government keeps saying they're reviewing it, they're considering options, they're engaging with the EU to understand the methodology. But meanwhile, these reviews are taking place. Tanker after tanker keeps arriving. Millions and millions more keep flowing to Russia. We don't need more reviews. We know the impact that's making. We need action now. And so I just want to finish by saying this. I know that Australians care about doing the right thing. I know that Australians believe in standing up to bullies. And I know that Australians value honesty and fairness. And that's why we're asking you here today to demand better from our government. Tomorrow morning at 3 a.m, the Proteus Bohemia will arrive under cover of darkness just below us here, or behind us. 20,000 tons of fuel made from Russian crude, $20 million for Putin's war machine. But it doesn't have to be this way. We have alternatives, we have choices, and we have the power to close this loophole. All we need is the political will. We need more pressure on our government, and they are already starting to feel it. So let's make our voices heard. Let's tell the government no more blood oil, no more funding both sides, and no more excuses. Australia, close the blood oil loophole. 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 Thank you.
Isa, thank you very much for voicing concern as a fellow Australian. Ksenia, thank you for highlighting the issues of the import of refined Russian crude onto Australian shores. And thank you, Andrew, for highlighting how Australian companies are profiting from this dirty blood oil trade. Today's protest, I would like to close with just one message. That the reason we have gathered here, the reason why we have members of our Ukrainian community here, why we have fellow Australians that support Ukrainians' fight for survival, is because we would like to stand on the right side of history. What is happening right now in the middle of Europe, the way that Russia continues not only to illegally invade, but continues to escalate its attacks on Ukrainian civilians and on Ukrainian cities, it's absolutely devastating. It's absolutely tragic. And we can do one of two things here. We can continue with our lives and pretend that a bloody war doesn't exist in Europe. We can pretend that it's not our problem, that someone else will solve it, someone else will fix it. And innocent people will continue to die. Or we can stand up for what Australia is known for fairness, for what is right. And we can demand from our government, from the Albanese government, to fix what is a blatant foreign policy fail. We can demand from the Albanese government to not only rhetorically stand with Ukraine, but to put action behind our Prime Minister's words when he says that Australia stands with Ukraine. Australia can stand with Ukraine by continuing to support Ukraine by providing military aid, by providing humanitarian aid, by enabling Ukrainians to defend its right to exist. But Australia, on Albanese's watch, can also fix that foreign policy fail and close a sanctions loophole that allows the import of blood oil onto Australian shores. Australians should be supporting and are supporting Ukraine, and the Albanese government should put actions above words and stop fueling Russia's war. Stop fueling Russia's war. Stop fueling Russia's war. Stop fueling Russia's war. Stop fueling Russia's war.
Stop fueling Russia's war! Stop fueling Russia's war!
Australian support for Ukraine is overwhelming. All you have to do is look at any single poll that's out there. Speak to people just in the streets. I have people walking up to me in supermarkets, on the street, whenever I wear anything that signifies Ukraine, whether it's a pin, whether it's a bracelet, whether it's a Ukrainian shirt. And we feel that support from a country that's 15,000 kilometers away from Ukraine. We know that Australians feel Ukraine's pain, and we know that Australians overwhelmingly support Ukraine. That is why we have to use our democratic voice. That is why we have to make the Albanese government aware of what we as a democratic country want. We want justice. We want fairness. And if there is one thing that you go away with today and that you can do as an Australian, as a citizen of a democratic country, you can reach out to your member of parliament with a simple email or a simple phone call and say that you support Ukraine and that you want the Albanese government to close the sanctions loophole, which unfortunately makes Australia the single largest importer of refined Russian crude in the world. Please use that democratic right. Please use your voice. Reach out to your members of parliament and ask the Albanese government to stop fueling Russia's war. Albanese government, stop fueling Russia's war. Albanese government, stop fueling Russia's war.
Albanese government, stop fueling Russia's war! Albanese government, stop fueling Russia's war!
And to everyone standing here with us today, I would like to say a sincere thank you for being here, for using your voice, for spending your Sunday morning that you could be with your family, that you could be doing absolutely anything else. But you chose to stand here, you chose to wave an Australian flag, you chose to wave a Ukrainian flag, and you want to be on the right side of history, you want justice, and that's what every single one of us here shares. That what we have in common is that we see things that are unfair. We would like to highlight things that the Australian government can do to fix a sanctions loophole that allows the funding of missiles, of drones that go and attack our family members, our dear and close ones. And thank you to our Australian friends that are helping us highlight this issue. Because without over-exaggerating, I want to let you know that this is the single biggest thing that we can do here in Australia. Don't underestimate the power of your voice, because by gathering here, by raising awareness, by getting the Sydney Morning Herald and others to highlight this as an issue nationally, we have the power to change what an entire country does, an entire country of Australia. We have the power to change global oil markets. We have the power to change how financial and investment decisions are made by our superannuation funds, by our hard-earned retirement savings, because they should not be investing in a company like Reliance that imports crude from Russia, refines it, and sells it to make a profit. Our retirement savings should not be funding that. Australia, as a government, on Albanese's watch, should not be allowing the existence of a sanctions loophole that allows Australia to be the biggest single importer of refined Russian crude that goes to support a war machine. And the only way that we could raise this awareness and make this a national public issue is by all of you using your voice to highlight this issue and to advocate with the Australian government. So thank you on behalf of the Australian Federation of Ukrainian Organizations, on behalf of our diaspora, and on behalf of every single Ukrainian that's standing up against the bloody Russian regime. Slava Ukraini!
і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Слава Україні!
Дуже дякую всім. Thank you, everybody.
Well, that's it for the Ukrainian rally. There was a there was a good number of people there, but there was a very limited number of people listening and filming. So I'm just looking at this place as an aside, like my snorkeling, and it looks like a pretty cool spot to go. I might go and have a chat to these guys, see what they say. All right, so that's it. Signing out from the Ukraine rally at Perouse today, the 30th of November 2025. Yeah, I just spoke to some kids and they said, yeah, it's a pretty good spot to snorkel. So this is, they built this wharf here, there's the Ukrainians for it. It's probably not appropriate to put at the end of the Ukrainian rally protest, but yeah, they're at the end there. They just built this wharf to do a run from here over to Kernel, but no one ever apparently took up the offer of the, running the boat. So the state spent a whole bunch of money on this wharf and it's never been used. It's used for fishing, it's fishermen here. Yeah, anyway, let's have a wander around.